Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Cults to Consciousness. We are back for another episode of Culty News, some Tim Ballard updates, and we have some experts and a witness here with us today. I'm just going to bring them on right away. Thank you so much for joining us, Carah and Ryan.
Hey,
Hello. Thanks to be here.
So we're bringing both of you on today because you guys have actually started an official podcast specifically uncovering and talking about everything that is going on with Tim Ballard and Tim Ballard News. So really excited to have you guys here, and we'll talk more about your involvement. But this is just the first call to action to anyone who's watching to go and subscribe to Carah's channel, where they will be covering everything Tim Ballard in depth. So is your new at Carah Burrell?
Right. So I changed it from Nuanto to at Carah Burrell as the YouTube channel. And then we have a new podcast we just started called Timmy Did What? That's available everywhere. And a Patreon with even more secrets at patreon.com/TimmyDidWhat.
Okay, so you guys are now the Timmy experts. I know, Carah, you have been on the case from the beginning. You've been diving into all of these reports, the court cases. You have lawyers coming to you saying, hey, can we get that information, because you are just doing an amazing job at uncovering everything. And then you, Ryan, have been a key witness in this, and you are actually going to Colombia to be a part of this trial that is happening in 2 weeks for Kelly. And so we're going to talk about what makes you the perfect witness to uncover more of the scandalous things that Tim Ballard has done. So if anyone is confused, who is Tim Ballard? Why is this relevant to our channel? So Tim Ballard, he was portrayed in the movie Sound of Freedom, which you may or may not have seen. It came out, like a year or so ago, that is depicting him being this hero saving children from sex trafficking, and it's supposed to be based on a true story. So that was like a whole big thing. Wow, Tim's a hero. It's amazing. He has and founded Operation Underground Railroad, which is supposed to be a foundation that is saving these children. So what's made this such a scandalous, controversial thing, or made him controversial, is that we now have women, victims, coming forward saying that he sexually assaulted them under what he called the couple's ruse, where they would pretend to be married to go in and find these trafficked kids, but he was doing things that he definitely should not have been doing, forcing them, pressuring them into it. So there is a court case happening with that right now. And now this other court case that is coming out from this woman who was depicted in Sound of Freedom itself, which made her out to be this monster, this basically the head of child trafficking, this ring, and completely ruined her life. We're going to get into those details. I'm just giving you the cliff notes here of what we're going to talk about. And what first started this whole thing was Tim Ballard going on this big rant about how he is involved in the Mormon church, or how he wants to become a prophet. Like, someone was leaking this information. Oh, he's trying to become, in the political race, he's trying to be propped up as this American hero. He eventually wants to be the prophet of the Mormon church and push the agenda of being Mormon. And he's like, yeah, I have full authority from Elder Ballard, who was alive at the time, has since passed, but he was the president of the first presidency of the Mormon Church. Ryan, tell me what was Quorum of the 12, thank you.
Apostles. Yeah.
Thank you so much. So very, very, very high up in the church. And the church was like, whoa, we're not affiliated with this guy. And it was this whole, if you watched our first videos with Carah and I, it was like, was he affiliated with Elder Ballard or was he not? And they're not actually related, even though they have the same last name. So all of that to say, Ryan, you are here to tell us about how, yes, absolutely, he was in fact getting orders from Elder Ballard, the highest level of the Mormon church, and it was all with this agenda to push Mormonism on the public, using Tim Ballard as the icon, if you will. And you're going to tell us how that went down. So how was that as a summary? Did I miss anything?
That was great.
Shalise, you're amazing. Like, you're giving a dissertation for a PhD. and you barely needed any help.
Thank you so
Amazing.
much over here in 90-degree studio because I can't have the AC on, so you're welcome, and I'm sweating. All right, so we have a lot to cover today, and thank you guys if you are here live. I love it, love it, love it when you guys show up and you write in those comments and those questions. Jonathan is at home with our little one, and he's going to be starring them and putting some of them up on the screen, so please leave those comments and questions in the comment section, and we will get to those. Super chats are greatly appreciated and put first. But we love you guys for being here. So, all right, let's get into Ryan. Your involvement with Tim Ballard way back in the day. Give us a little bit of history about you and Tim.
Sure. Yeah. So I met Tim in 2011 at a Book of Mormon research conference that happened in Orem. And I heard one of his presentations. He was just an aspiring author at that time. He was working for the Department of Homeland Security, authored a book called The American Covenant. He did a presentation about his research connecting, as many of you know, Abraham Lincoln read the Book of Mormon. It inspired him to become a prophet in the Civil War and speak like a prophet and things like that. And he's making the connections between American history and themes from the Book of Mormon. Well, as an active member of the church and hearing this for the first time, I took to the message, thought it was awesome. I was creating at the time a TV show that was called Nephite Explorer, which aired on KJAZ Channel 14 here in Utah, Idaho, Arizona for 4 years between 2012 and 2016. And so I featured Tim from the very first season, and he kind of became a regular on my TV show, talking about some of these providential connections to American history that really fit in and supported Mormon theology. So I platformed Tim early on before he became Tim the OUR, Tim the Deseret Book #1 author, before any of that, and became friends with him and platformed him and his message, made it mainstream starting in 2012. And I was around for the founding of OUR. I subsequently created and ran American Covenant tours in which Tim and I would take busloads of people to all of these historical sites on the East Coast where these miracles happened during Revolutionary War and American history. So I was involved early on with OUR. I was around through all of this and ran the American Covenant tours and featured Tim and his research. So became friends with him and his family and watched the evolution of his career from the very beginning all the way till about 2017 when we had a falling out. And so the question that you proposed and that a lot of people are wondering is, Tim claims that he was really close with Elder Ballard. He was, Elder Ballard was in support of him and his message, but that he never used Elder Ballard's name to advance his own agenda. And the church is saying Elder Ballard was just a friend of Tim's, but Tim betrayed their friendship and they never had any business dealings. Mm-hmm. And Tim, to this day, in recent videos that we've seen, is still ranting about Elder Ballard and how he's in support of Tim and his message and everything. So everybody's wondering, well, what is the truth? Like, where does Tim's association with the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints start and finish? Mm-hmm. Where does his association with Elder Ballard start and finish? And so that's where I come in, and I can tell you how it started and what that relationship looked like, and how intertwined they actually were. And this isn't necessarily, I'm not attacking the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I'm not calling anybody out for anything. Tim deceived a lot of people, and one of those people was Elder Ballard. That relationship started in 2012 when Elder M. Russell Ballard took an interest in Tim and his historical work, his revisionist history, his Mormon history, whatever you want to call it, and brought Tim into conversations with the church and had him be a part of what could only be described as a PR effort for the Mormon Church. And what I witnessed in conversations with Tim, and even in meetings with general authorities, including Elder Ballard, was that the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, their agenda was to become accepted into the wider family of evangelical churches in America. They wanted to be considered Christian, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of always been a thorn in their side, that evangelical churches, Catholicism, nobody accepts Mormons as Christians. And they want to change that perception. So it was seen that Tim could be a bridge between these two varying theologies, these varying religions, because Tim was blending Mormonism with American history, and they seemed to support each other and the miracles and things like that. And if Tim became really popular in the, white Christian national movement or the evangelical movement in America, then that would reflect well in the church, because Tim is an active member of, or was an active member of, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. So the very first I heard about this, it was proposed that, and this was an idea floating around among the PR department of the church in 2012. It was proposed that, because Tim hadn't really become well known at this time at all, it was proposed that they create a national version of his book, take out all the Mormon references, and then scrub the internet, was the term that was used, of Tim Ballard's Mormon connections, his history, all that, scrub the internet. And so that his Mormon connections would not be a hindrance for his career advancement as this historian / theologian / American hero, which we'll get to in a minute. And then he could come out later and point people towards the Mormon Church, point people towards the Book of Mormon that has this message about there's a covenant on this land and we need to be obedient to God's laws, or bad things are going to happen. Wrath of God will come down upon us like it did in the Civil War, and we want to be in God's favor. So the first plan was to scrub the internet of Tim's Mormon connections. And I didn't like this plan at the beginning, first off, because it was going to affect me. I was going to have to, they're going to require me to take down my show and all my content, which was called Nephite Explorer. It was very clearly Mormon content.
Yeah.
And so that was going to affect me, but ultimately that plan was scrapped because it was going to be too costly and it probably wouldn't have worked. There's too many Mormon references, connections to Tim Ballard. So when we scrapped that plan, thankfully I didn't have to take down all my content. The next agenda was, well, let's still pursue the goal of making Tim American hero, not just pseudo historian, but a religious figure that is Mormon, and see if we can't steer people towards Mormonism through his research. And this goes in line with their overall efforts. Like recently, if you've been paying attention, or even if you haven't, it's been very subtle. The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints icons on Google's Maps used to be little mini depictions of Angel Moroni and Angel with a Trumpet on Google Maps. And now it's been changed to crosses. That just happened a couple of months ago, I think.
Hold the phone. Crosses?
Yeah.
Because
crosses.
that was a huge no. That was a huge no growing
I know.
up wearing crosses.
Yeah, I have a whole rant on this, but continue. Yeah.
Yeah.
The proposition of Mormonism has failed. That's the TLDR.
Moroni got fired. It's so sad. But yeah, I mean, for those of us, I mean, all up until now, crosses were the symbol of what? The apostate Christian churches, right?
Right.
And anyways, and then just even more recently, my daughter pointed out that they are holding either at UVU, I think, or at BYU, a worship service soon in which they're featuring evangelical Christian music.
Yeah. Yeah, they did that at the Delta Center as well, too. Yeah.
Yeah, that's new to me. I just heard about that.
Interesting.
Yeah, they're workshopping things also, where like the missionaries will invite people to Bible study instead of Book of Mormon, and then bring in the Book of Mormon later, and like missionaries are introducing themselves with their first names, and they're doing a lot of things that would present themselves as different than the Mormonism that we once knew.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
basically
interesting.
they're just kind of rebranding and they want Tim to be the face of it and to basically bridge the gap between what people would say is real Christians versus Mormons and kind of like sneak in the Mormonism a little bit later. So they want to turn him into this American hero, and you were in on these conversations. Can we talk about that conversation that you had with Elder Ballard, this super secret meeting that you had?
Sure. Yeah. So in 2016, I was invited to a meeting with Tim and John Moreland, the president of OUR. And this was a few years after Operation Underground Railroad had been founded and was off the ground and running. And part of this plan to make Tim an American hero was to have him have his own organization in which he could go out, save kids, be a superhero of sorts, and gain notoriety from those efforts, but then steer people towards his religious beliefs, which would steer people towards the Mormon Church. Does that make sense? You got to get him famous first. You got to get famous as an American hero, as somebody that's beloved by the American people. And so that's what OUR was about, Operation Underground Railroad, where he would conduct sting operations to go out and save kids that were involved in exploitation and human trafficking. And then he would use that notoriety to steer people towards his religious beliefs, which would steer people towards favorable impression of the Mormon Church, right? So I was invited to a meeting with Tim, John Moreland, and Elder Ballard in 2016, in which we discussed this plan. And I was given the task or the unofficial calling to make a new TV show in addition to the local one that I was doing for a national audience that would feature Tim's American Covenant research and try and get Tim more celebrity status for that side of Tim Ballard, the historian, religious person, not the secret agent person. Get that message out there because Tim was already gaining popularity and notoriety and becoming somewhat of not a household name yet, but it was on that trajectory. So I was given an unofficial calling by Elder Ballard to make this TV show. But it was also made apparent to me that the church could not be seen as having anything to do with it. And because if it was, then it would just be propaganda for the church, right? So that was my special secret calling from Elder Ballard to make Tim a household name by creating a national TV show that featured Tim so that he would become a household name in evangelical America.
Wow. So for those who aren't familiar with Mormonism, getting a calling is basically a volunteer position. Almost everyone who's in the congregation, or what they would call a ward, gets this job. Everything is volunteer based, right? So even the bishop, no one gets paid on those lower levels. So getting a calling from a guy who is essentially one step below the prophet of the Mormon Church is a huge deal, and it would be seen as a very high honor to have something like that. So especially if he's telling you it's super secret, like keep this between us type of thing. How did that make you feel about the whole operation, Ryan?
Well, it was an impossible task. I wanted and asked and pled for the church's resources to be, they just wanted me to pull a TV show, a nationally recognized TV show out of a hat. And It's an impossible task. It felt like they said that they would connect me with BYU TV and we could get started there. But they really wanted me to take it to a distributor that would be a national audience. And the very next week, Tim wanted to start shooting. And so I don't know. I didn't even know how to wrap my head around this. And it was really frustrating because the church would ask me to do this, but would not provide any resources or support because they didn't want to be looked upon as involved in this. So you see what I'm saying? So it was really, really frustrating at the time to try and create a TV show out of thin air with no resources, no funding, and no support.
Yeah. So what became of that? Did it get off the ground at all?
No, it didn't. Shortly after that, Tim and I had a falling out, and I abandoned the project, and especially without any support or resources or funding of any kind, because then I would have to go and ask other people to be involved in this and create this TV project as a volunteer status. And unless they were willing to spend their own time and money and energy in this, they weren't. I couldn't get people to sign up on the premise, and you know, by that point, I'd been around Tim long enough to know that he's not who he claims he was, and I had conflict. In fact, going into this meeting, I already had conflicted feelings about should I be supporting this guy in any way, shape, or form. And so I wasn't super on board with devoting more of my time and talents and abilities to building this guy up into American hero. I had already platformed him once, and it also felt really deceptive. You know, that's that just kind of gnawed at me. Like, all right, so we need to do this in a way that basically hides the Mormonism in this message to try and is deceptive. You know, the purpose of it wasn't simply to advance the religious ideas of the American Covenant. It was really more to advance the PR missionary efforts of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. So I had conflicted feelings at the time about it, and I still do.
Yeah, and I gotta say, it's pretty on par with things that the church tries to do, right? They have all these big ideas, but go do it for free on your own time. Like, we have billions of dollars, but we're not gonna give it to you. You figure it out. And it's a calling from God, so don't let us down. So now let's tie in, Carah, we're gonna throw it to you. Let's talk about what's going on with this case, and then we'll tie it back to how Ryan is involved and why he's involved.
Sure. So if you've seen the Sound of Freedom movie, hopefully you haven't, but Shalise mentioned at the beginning that Tim Ballard just rose to fame last summer, even bigger and better than ever by the Sound of Freedom movie. It was one of the highest grossing independent films of all time, made over $150 million, was one of the most popular movies in 2023. And because of this movie and the myth making that's gone along with Tim Ballard from the very beginning, the Sound of Freedom movie does need to be debunked. And the characters that are portrayed within that movie, some of them Tim has decided to base on real people and try to manipulate the story for his own myth making. And one of those people is Kely Suarez. And she is involved in a lawsuit right now in Colombia, and it is going to trial in the next couple of weeks. So kind of feels like Christmas is coming early in a way, because Tim Ballard, he is fighting different court cases and civil suits here in Utah right now, but also in Colombia. And Tim Ballard's attorneys have tried to dismiss her lawsuit and claim things around defamation. However, the judge dismissed it, and then it moved into discovery. And the reason why this case is so important is not only it's going to be revealing a lot of the inner workings of this myth making from the very beginning of how the Sound of Freedom storyline that Tim supposes is about 95% true, and how it's actually about 110% false and also really harmful. So not only will the trial be uncovering the truth behind the Sound of Freedom movie, it's also hopefully going to get some justice to this woman, Kely Suarez, who Tim roped in the early days of OUR, needing kind of a myth making, a founder's story, going down to Colombia and truly entrapping and soliciting people into a sex party on an island, planning these camera crews to come in and putting out Facebook posts and trying as much as he could to make a market for something in a child sex trade in Cartagena that did not actually exist. And so he put out these Facebook calls that, hey, people, do you want to come to a party? And basically entrapped a lot of people. A lot of children ended up traumatized from that. But he filmed it, and he made some good fame for himself and a good storyline. But there are real people and real stories in this. And Kely Suarez got she's a really kind of like young, impoverished young woman who was not, she's labeled kind of like a beauty queen in the Sound of Freedom movie. That's not really even true. She just was kind of like a representative from her neighborhood. The movie kind of portrays her as somebody who owned a modeling agency where she would get little kids and tell them they're going to have a career in modeling and then kidnap them and put them in shipping containers and sell them into sex slavery. And Tim has gone around for a long time defaming Kelly's character and saying the movie is 95% true and that this character, Giselle, in the movie is based on Kely Suarez. And he's made no differentiation, saying this is based on a true story and smearing her name all over Colombia to the point where, yes, she got arrested for being a sex trafficker. And from when this operation happened many, many years ago, she spent 18 months in jail. Tim has been able to defame her and she can't show her face in public basically anymore. So we really want to get the true story and get some justice for Kelly, who was just somebody who showed up herself to prostitute herself in a desperate situation. And Tim was able to, the more people that he claims that he's put behind bars, the more his numbers are up, the bigger of a hero he looks like. But entrapping people and throwing people into prison for 18 months and smearing their name all throughout Colombia just so that he can have an origin story is not okay. So that's kind of the brief overview, and that trial is just about to start right now. So like I said, Christmas is kind of coming early because we're going to be able to see so many different revelations right now in the news that's going to be coming every day.
Yeah. Thank you, Carah. That was very well said. So I think the main part of this that we need to focus on is that this woman saw a Facebook ad. She needed money. She was willing to essentially prostitute herself at the sex party, thinking that she would make money. And in turn, the party was put on. It was basically a ruse that they staged, OUR staged, allegedly. And she shows up, and because she was one of the older people there, she got pinned for being the one who put it together. And then this whole movie ends up being centered around her, and she was put in jail. Not actually convicted, though, of anything, right? She was just put in jail for 18 months.
Right. She got out on habeas corpus.
Right.
So she served time for something that she didn't do. And then when she got out, Ryan, you were telling me she got her life together. She put herself through law school. She was like, okay, I'm putting this behind me, doing my best to move forward. And then the movie came out, and it was clear that it was based on her, and everything just completely collapsed at that point.
Yeah. Yeah, that movie, Sound of Freedom, worldwide distribution, including Cartagena, Colombia. And it wrecked her life all over again.
Right. Wow. And if you want me to, I can read her portions of the lawsuit to just kind of give people what she's actually alleging, and then we can counter that with what Tim is alleging as well. So
that's good.
You want to put my screen up, Jonathan? So on October 7th, 2014, a meeting was held between Ballard, Elkin, and Eduardo, where they agreed that Ballard would pay between $250 and $300 per child provided at a pedophile party. So up to this point, basically it's discussing how Tim is just kind of on the beaches of Cartagena. He's talking to some different people who live hand to mouth every day and like, can I get you some drugs? Can I get you some cocaine? Can I get you some women? And then he says, I have somebody, which is Paul Hutchinson, who wants 10 and 13-year-old virgins to rape anally. Trigger warning. I'm sorry I have to go there, but this is how Tim is. He's so direct with he wants the most disgusting things, and people in this situation, sometimes they will try to provide it where that market did not exist already. So Ballard also gave Eduardo money to make arrangements for the party. It was decided that a social media invitation would go out on Facebook, inviting young people to the party. Plaintiff Kelly, I thought it was her last name for a second. Ignore me. Plaintiff Kelly was nowhere near this meeting and had no way of knowing that it was occurring. Court records verify that Plaintiff Kelly was not at this meeting. On October 9th, 2014, Eduardo called Elkin and told him that he could provide more children than previously agreed, and he could lower the price of each child. A meeting was held that same day. They were present along with recently turned 18-year-old gay young man named Samuel. So these are all various different people who are plaintiffs in the lawsuit. And then Samuel said that he could obtain 26 female children and 6 male children, given he worked in a modeling school. This is where he met plaintiff Kelly, and thought that he could recruit more kids. So this is over and over again, we've talked about how Tim will go into these places and he will throw some money around and he will create a market for something that was not there before, and then claim that he solved a problem that did not need to be solved, but he did create one. So Kelly was nowhere near this meeting and had no way of knowing that it was occurring, nor did she have any knowledge of the theme of the meeting or what was discussed. And then it goes on to say that at a bare minimum, plaintiff Kelly would be paid to attend the party. And plaintiff Kelly also saw the party invitation on Facebook. And this is a part of a lot of different news media things and the myth making that Tim Ballard was doing at the time. There's a CBS News special on this that Tim goes around to different conferences and he'll show the clips from. And this is, again, one of the founding stories of OUR. And what he really did was entrap different, impoverished people into a situation, smear them, change the story so that he could bump up his numbers of what he was doing, so that when the facts of the case actually don't matter, but this white saviorism that Tim Ballard is trying to forward, when he goes back home to Utah, like Ryan was saying, the myth is now created. The actual lives of people who are destroyed, the children who are crying and they don't know what's happening. There's cameras there. There's also, should I tell the thing about the police? Should I add that in right now?
Let's wait till we can read the testimony.
Okay, we'll wait till we can read the testimony on it. There's a lot of heinous things going on, all for this myth making for Tim, so that when he goes back to Utah, he can have this amazing founder story of this heroic thing that he did. And all the while, there's one other, let me switch to this one as well. In addition to that, there's also this great article, Colombian testimony, bribe offered to pose as victim that Tim Ballard rescued, that there was a woman from the group allegedly rescued by Ballard in The Sound of Freedom, is outraged by movie's false portrayal. She testifies Operation Underground Railroad grants were used to persuade alleged victims to corroborate Ballard's rescue story, provided the wired transfer receipt. And she also claims bribes were effectively offered to play a victim at the Bogota, Colombia movie premiere. So it's pretty much as bad as you could guess that it would be, that not only is he, smearing people, entrapping people, creating victims, traumatizing children to film it for his myths, also creating an entire myth and paying people to literally lie and say that they were rescued by him when they weren't. So these are all things that we're going to be covering in future podcasts more in depth. But that is, again, all part of this big, giant ruse within a ruse of Tim Ballard and Sound of Freedom, this movie that went all around the world. And sex trafficking is between children and adults is obviously a real thing and a horrible crime and something that we all want to stop. But it was within this myth making and this savior complex that Tim had in the state of Utah and around the world, and in these, different Fox News and right-wing circles, that then emboldened him with his different church backing and his credibility as the anti-sex trafficking guy, to then really have nothing but an emboldened stature as he went and did the couple's ruse, allegedly, and raped, several women, and all without thinking that anything was going to come back to bite him. So all of this is just a gigantic savior-making complex that Tim has been building for years, that the Mormon Church helped build. Ryan is regretful that he helped build in the early days. But the truth of the matter is, it needs to end now. The allegations are really serious. The evidence that we're going to be showing on our podcast is extremely substantial. The testimonies of the women that he has sexually assaulted are horrifying and really substantial as well. So we want to stand up for those victims. We want to stand up for people who have been wronged, like Kely Suarez, and honestly, like entire countries and nations. And I would say like the entire brown and black population of the world that Tim Ballard has gone in with his cameras to go and film these operations, making money, making fame for himself on the backs of other hardworking people in the name of exploiting them in an effort to stop exploitation,
right,
to then exploit other people further.
And I think that's such the huge issue here, because people could say all day, oh, it was a movie, like no one said it was 100% truthful, but it goes so far beyond that. It's the fact that he created this need for children to be sex trafficked in this area so that he could have a sizzle reel to create this movie. It's so many levels of wrong and layers of wrong that are so disgusting and actually affected real people and real children and their lives, and now Kelly and everything that she's been going through, just to prop him up as this American hero and just to push Mormonism as the ultimate propaganda. It's just really sickening and disheartening, and the fact that he seems to have no awareness, the massive ripple effect that his actions have had on people and the devastation that his actions have had. So what is Tim saying? What's his response to all of this coming out?
Do you want to take that one, Ryan?
Sure. He is continuing the narrative that he is just a guy trying to save kids, and anybody that opposes him is working for the pedophiles, is working for the human traffickers. That includes me, that includes Carah, that includes, I guess, the lawyers and the women that have come forth, which is not only incredibly insensitive and offensive, but it's absolutely just flat out not true. I am involved in this because I platformed this guy. I was behind his cause of both his religious American Covenant stuff as well as wanting him to be successful in saving kids. Elder Ballard wanted Tim to be successful in saving kids. I'm sure he has, nobody involved doesn't want to not save kids, right?
Yeah.
That's a good thing. However, I was involved in 3 different projects, 3 different television producer projects with Tim. And from the meetings that I've been involved in and getting to know Tim and where his motivations lie, saving kids was secondary to advancing him as an American hero and building up his own persona and character, ego, celebrityship, whatever you want to call it. That was primary. And once you know that, then everything kind of makes sense. It makes sense why at the sex party in Cartagena, there weren't any actual human traffickers, so they need to pick a fall guy like Kelly. And all the children that were released because they weren't actually trafficked, well, that's okay, because we just need to create what you identified as a sizzle reel. It was all about the sizzle reel. They needed to create the documentary style Jason Bourne mission where Tim goes in and saves the day. And I mean, Americans love superhero. They love spy movies and they love people and characters like that. And he was creating that in real life about himself. In fact, not only Tim, but Sean Reyes, they submitted, I haven't even shown it to you yet, a screenplay about a movie they wrote about themselves, about Tim Ballard and Sean Reyes, an attorney general, go out to bust the bad guys. They're writing screenplays for fictional movies based on themselves as real characters to like become these James Bond type of people in the eyes of the American public. It's incredibly immature, but once you understand that that's the motivation, then all of these actions make a lot more sense, if I can put it that way.
Yeah. In addition to that, the great summary too, Tim Ballard, his response, we did a video on our channel. We're going to be doing even more because Tim put out this video on this interview with a podcaster named Last Dispensation, who is a pro-Mormon YouTuber guy. And a lot of people said that Tim looked really drunk or something in the video, and it was only up for a couple hours. So we grabbed it before apparently Tim Ballard's lawyers said that they needed to take it down. And this is Tim at his most unhinged, and I could think his most authentic, his angriest. And he's talking into the camera for about an hour, just saying every single smear under the book of that these women, the lawyers, that, you know, all of the people who are against him, that have betrayed him, that they all either they are the pedophiles, or they are helping the pedophiles, or that they have blood on their hands, because we only saved 14 kids this week, but we could have saved 50. And in our last video, we debunked that even what he's saying, he did not help in this latest like Mexican raid on like a sex parlor of teenagers and children. So Tim he's in free fall right now. And so his defenses are just flying all over the place, because he's grasping at straws, and he's so desperate. And so between really smearing these women as not as stopping his cause of sex trafficking, because they're trying to tell the truth about what happened to them, in addition to debunking that, he also has a section of this video that's been taken down where he talks and specifically lays out why the Kely Suarez case, why they're going to win it, and just throws out a bunch of different things. And amongst them, because I'm the nuanto, I'm Carah Burrell, but since I'm the nuanto, one thing that I do think, since I try to be as understanding as I can, in Tim's point of view, I think what he's trying to say is his best defense is that there is video recording of everything that happened on this island, of this raid. And he says it'll all come out in court. And so, to Tim's credit, I think that a lot of this stuff is on video. And so if she truly was sitting down in these meetings and she said, I have these kids and I want you to be delicate with them when you are molesting them and all these heinous things, if she is on video saying all of those things that he claims that she's saying on video, we will let the court proceedings go forward, and then we can make our judgments then. But until that time, what the evidence is showing and what Tim's like patterns of character are showing, and that something completely different has happened. So Tim says that he has all this stuff on video. We'll just have to wait and see.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow, that's a lot to unpack, and that's happening in 2 weeks.
Yeah, August 30th.
And you're flying down, right, Ryan? Are you gonna? We're still deciding.
To be determined. I can remote into the court proceedings and give my testimony there.
But we really want you to go, because we want you to go film stuff and start interviewing people, because it's just, I really want to stand up for all different types of victims, and especially the ways in which in Colombia that like Kelly's name was smeared to begin with. And then it's really interesting Google translating different articles and stuff, the way that the tides have kind of turned, and that people are like, wait a second, this guy who came down here selling us this Sound of Freedom movie, this white savior who's stomping all over our like young, beautiful like Colombian woman and ruining their life. They're like, wait a second, we've heard this imperialist tale a few too many times. The Colombians have kind of turned on him. But I mean, if you're from Colombia and you want to tell us what the news is on the ground there, you're welcome to. But that's kind of the reporting that we're getting, that people have completely turned against Tim Ballard, and they want to have, vindication and truth come to the surface for their Colombian young woman, Kelly.
And what I've heard is that if the verdict on this comes down in favor of Kelly, that Tim used to exploit her for his own personal gain, that is going to blow up and spread like wildfire throughout Central South America. Because it's if that's the truth that comes out, if that's what the judge in this court determines, then that is wrong on so many levels. This woman suffered horribly on so many levels. And all the people that have supported and wanted to get behind the cause of anti-human trafficking, saving kids, which a lot of people donated time and money and effort into this. If that turned out to be not what it claims to be, then a lot of people are going to be very upset. And this is the first case in this saga that's going to trial. And so it's pretty big and important.
Yeah. So Ryan, when it comes to your involvement, what is your main points? What are your main points that you want to make sure that the court really hears from you?
Yeah, I went on Carah's podcast. I've been following this obviously very closely for the last year, ever since those lawsuits came out. And it's just like been eating me up inside because I had a front row seat to all of this from the very beginning. And I saw that Tim's motivations were primarily and 100% to advance himself and his own name. And yeah, if we save kids in the process, that's a good perk also. But that came secondary. So my testimony, and it comes from my own, I created a TV concept called The Abolitionists in 2011, 2012 that he ended up taking and running with. I was pitching that and in negotiations with National Geographic Channel about that show, which ultimately became the Abolitionists and Operation Tucson and the pattern for how he made all these mini documentaries that The Sound of Freedom was based on. And then the bigger one with Elder Ballard and the national TV show. So I was his producer for a number of years, or one of his producers. And I can say squarely that his motivations are solely to advance himself, his own name, his recognition, and his own hero status in America. That's the primary motivation. And if that's the case, which I believe it is, then the raid in Cartagena wasn't about saving kids. It was about staging superhero type catching the villain scenario. And that is completely different from being motivated to just save kids. You know, the purpose of the film shoots were to get what you described and what everybody's heard Tim talk about is the sizzle reel. And so I added my testimony to, after I went on Carah's podcast to talk about this, I reached out because Carah is somebody that saw through the BS from the very beginning. I was blown away because she wasn't part of OUR. All the people that I know that are friends of mine that were in OUR from the very beginning were like, oh my gosh, somebody finally, is calling out Tim for his BS and stuff. But the public was still like, no, he's still a good guy. There's no way any of this could be true. And then I saw Carah talking about it. She covered it and she saw through the BS. I don't know how you do that. It's like these special glasses she must have that are anti-BS. She saw through it, saw what the real motivations are, calling Tim out. And so my wife got sick of me like trying to talk to her about this, like, and this, and people need to know about that. And so I reached out to Carah and went on her podcast just so I could get my story out there and lend credibility to the women's claims. After I went on Carah's podcast, and the lawyers reached out to me and said, actually, your story and your testimony is very relevant to this Kely Suarez case. And so would you be willing to submit an affidavit telling your story? And so I wrote hastily, because we only had 48 hours to submit this to the court, an affidavit for the Kely Suarez case, which outlines how the motivations for this was to advance Tim as an American hero. That's what his calling was from the church. That's what the church was pushing him to do. So it would reflect well on them. And it had nothing to do with saving kids, but that was a secondary, and that's generous.
Because you can just make that up. Tim's learned you can actually just make that up and people won't fact check you. And you can just take credit for things that other people did. And Ryan, you mentioned in our last podcast that if you paid for the dog food for a dog that was involved on a operation somewhere, you get a claim that whatever children were rescued, OUR did that. So yeah.
And so there's a lot of credibility issues around Tim. And so that's my involvement. Is my testimony, I guess, is the same. And we just got a little video clip from Catherine Ballard last week on Last Dispensations podcast, in which she says the purpose of all of the OUR rescuing kids efforts was to make Tim.
This is his wife, by the way.
This is Tim's wife, Catherine Ballard.
Just last week.
She says was to get Tim into a place in American culture where they could then steer people towards the Mormon covenant, the American covenant, the Book of Mormon principles. Catherine Ballard just said that. And we're going to cover that. Yeah, I mean, she said that. And so, she's claimed that, Tim has claimed that, others have claimed that. Everybody's like, well, those aren't credible witnesses. And yeah, I'm with you. Those aren't credible, reliable witnesses. But I have nothing to gain by saying, yeah, that is what it was about. And so I'm lending my voice to it, saying that it was about making Tim into an American hero. The church's efforts behind making him Deseret Book's #1 author was to make an American hero that would reflect well on the church. And this isn't an attack on the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. It's just they screwed up. I screwed up. We all screwed up in platforming this guy. And so now it's our responsibility, including the Mormon churches, to deplatform him and change this narrative and stop him advancing everything he's doing, stop him from creating more damage, from hurting more people, and from advancing his own political ambitions, which right now he's trying to seek a position in the Trump administration should Trump win. He's speaking at the Republican National Convention just a couple months ago. He's putting out videos talking about the border crisis. And so he still has political clout. He has a following. There's a lot of people that are in support of him. And he still has a lot of money. He's still raising money. He's still doing couples ruses on
That's another big one.
his own organization. So this guy, somebody needs to stop him. And I hope that by doing this podcast with Carah, we can invite people to tell their stories and get some of the other counter Tim Ballard narrative facts out on the table. And so we hopefully you'll tune into those and help spread that message as well, because it's important and something I can get behind.
Yeah.
Ryan's the
Thank
real
you guys
deal.
so much. So are you, Carah. You're
I
a
just
real
have to
deal
say-
team.
I just have to say that there are so many people who know things and worked inside OUR. Ryan is one of the very, very, very few people who didn't have a whole lot to gain, but had a lot to lose. And to your conscience, you had to stand up for these women and speak up for what was right, depending on different circumstances and relationships and things. Would you say it's hurt some or helped some, or have you felt in danger, or why some people that should come forward or haven't come forward? But Ryan's the real deal that he was able to step forward, because you're honestly changing the face of this case for the women in Utah and Kelly in Colombia.
Well, but it couldn't be my testimony, and these stories could not be out there making a difference without you and Shalise and people like you that have a platform to spread this information. So you're just as important.
But
But you, though.
I wanted you to brag about yourself more, because there's just so much going on behind the scenes where I'm like, Ryan, you're so dope. Thank you so much for lending your voice to this, spending your time on this. There's just some people who could be doing other things and they're just like, I won't worry about it. I don't want to get involved in this, but
Well, I still have time to regret doing this, so I can't put a verdict on that. I don't know. Tim's a scary guy. But to that, I know I've spoken to a lot of people that are part of OUR, and the problem is Tim has, because he's got the endorsement of Elder Ballard and has that for the last 10 years until recently, he's still claiming Elder Ballard was in support of him. He died a month after the church issued its denouncement of Tim. And so Elder Ballard can't come forward and set the record straight, but Catherine just claimed that she spoke to Elder Ballard, and Elder Ballard didn't know about the denouncement, didn't know about the press release. Anyways, Tim is still pushing this narrative that attacking him is attacking the church. He was a member in good standing, or he still is, supposedly. And by attacking him as Deseret Book's #1 author, as personal friend of Elder Ballard, supported by the church and Elder Ballard, you're attacking the church. And so that's and so people are afraid to come forward because they don't want to be seen as attacking the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, Mormon Church. Even though that's not what this is about. Everybody's just trying to focus on taking down the bad guy, taking down Tim, who's causing harm. And it doesn't reflect well on the church. And that's a problem, but you can't save the church's reputation and take down Tim Ballard, and because they were so closely tied for so many years. But I really don't think anybody's going to really lose their testimony if the church just came out and said, yeah, Elder Ballard made a mistake. He was deceived by this guy, and we shouldn't have partnered with him for all these other business endeavors. which we can't go into right now, but there's a lot of business endeavors between the church, Elder Ballard's son, and all the things that Tim was doing. I just hope that the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, who has been silent on this issue for the last 9 months, would come out in support of the women, the victims.
Yeah.
You know, I think remaining neutral is more or less supporting the perpetrator. And if there's already been a reputation of the church as not supporting victims of sexual assault, and this is like doesn't help that doesn't help their case, you know.
Yeah, I agree. Well, this is one of many videos that we're going to be doing with you guys. This was the topic today, the Kely Suarez case down in Colombia. Again, to wrap it around, happening in 2 weeks down there. And you guys, Carah and Ryan, are covering it on your brand new podcast, Timmy Did What? So everyone go subscribe to them over at Carah Burrell. We will link everything in the description. And I think, were you taking donations to go to Colombia?
Well, we are taking donations for just the podcast in general, but neither of us have passports yet, so probably can't actually do that. It's just like a pipe dream. But like you'd have it paid because you're testifying, but you could. We would love to film, and we have some documentary stuff in the works, and some.
There's a lot of people that have stories that need to be told in all of these third world countries that OUR went to. There are stories that I know about that are absolute bombshells that illuminate so much of this, but we need help getting to the places to tell these stories. So
so if you've ever heard me on my YouTube channel talk about a year ago about how I was making like a little YouTube documentary, and I decided just to like not even release that because it just doesn't do justice to how much Oscar like totally got me off my thing.
I'm sorry.
Hey, he was just saying, go. I'll support you.
That I wanted to hold that back and actually pursue something that could be a documentary that would actually be like a multi-part series on Hulu and stuff. So that's what we're planning for in the future. And all signs point to yes. We just we want to let the trial kind of work out its way right now, but there's a lot of interest from a lot of different people who want to interview the women who want to tell this story. And Ryan and I, we have, really become good advocates and friends with these women. And we want to make sure that their stories get told right and respectfully. And all these, like Ryan mentioned, different stories of different bombshells in different countries and things. And so until we're ready to do that, we are doing this YouTube channel and this podcast to get the story out there, because there's such a long, thorough rabbit hole of so many different angles to take. So we're going to be releasing weekly, semi-weekly podcasts on that. And as we do it, trying to fundraise for our sizzle reel, for our documentary, pay for like computers and stuff. Like we need to fundraise for Ryan to get, and like renting out studio space and all the stuff that goes into two people doing this as their like semi part-time, full-time jobs. So I do have donations to a donor box. All donations are tax deductible in the United States, and a Venmo that can all help support this.
Wait, Oscar, oh my gosh.
Buy security equipment to not get killed.
But don't ever call it the sizzle reel again.
I know. I was like,
that's not the right term. I don't want to hear it.
It's the Tim Ballard sizzle reel.
Yeah, it's a different kind of sizzle reel, but that term
that is what
so
it's called in the
disgusting
industry, right?
Yeah,
a sizzle reel.
But
yeah,
but
we've kind of tainted that term. Hey, I am sorry for anyone who is watching and ears have been blown out by this naughty wiener. He's never done this before in studio. He's obviously very upset about this case. We're all outraged. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing, and thank you to everyone who watched live. If you're part of the replay crew, leave those comments and likes. It'll help boost us to more people. This needs to get out there and be exposed. Again, I'm sorry for this naughty wiener. Oh my goodness. Thank you guys. Go subscribe. And yes, Oscar Mayer.
Oh.
He is so
what is he mad
upset.
Tim Ballard,
there was
he can't
another
stand
dog
him.
in the building.
Like,
it was the first time this has ever happened. It's live, of course. Anyways, thank you guys. You're amazing. Go support Carah and Ryan's new podcast. And
Thanks.
Thank you for joining, everyone. And until next time, follow your highest excitement, be conscious, and be well.
Mhm.